Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today's video is the ASUS Zephyrus S15. So this is their ultra premium notebook for thin, lightweight, and I'm really excited to share it with you today. So this is going to be the full review. Let's see how well it can perform in such a small chassis, along with how well it actually performs in some games. So let's watch to find out. Let's roll. All right, so I got this just a few days ago, and I have to say this is one of the nicest units I've had the pleasure of working with. So, a couple things to note. This is what they consider their Ultrabook. So in terms of thickness, this is about 19 millimeters. What they've done though is they've created this with only 4.5 pounds, just under 4.5 pounds. And how did they do that? Well, you got this great aluminum deck, and then the entire chassis itself is actually a magnesium alloy. So it's got a unique feel and texture to it. The one thing I have to say is that it's actually able to keep the deck fairly cool, and I really like that. The other feature it has is the way that it gets its cooling. In fact, there is no vents on the bottom. These are just simply speaker vents. There's a couple like vents here, but this is fully sealed. And it doesn't get that warm, actually. What I found is it's around about 35 Celsius on the back side. And in terms of the lid actually only gets up to about 45 degrees Celsius, and not where you'd expect it on the keyboard, usually just in the back area and by the power button, but you're not using that very often. So how did they do this? Well, take a look at this unique design. So it actually, when you open it up, it folds down the back to allow air to come in through the side here. And so then it exhausts out the back. So that's a really unique design. I haven't seen this in any other notebook, and a pretty innovative way to keep this thing cool. We'll see how that actually fares in some practice through some actual gaming benchmarks a little bit later. But overall, I'm really happy. It's really rigid. There is one quality issue that I actually noticed on the screen. It's slightly bent. So you can kind of take a look as one corner is just slightly kind of cockeyed from the other one, but you won't notice, well, at least I don't notice it when I'm playing or using it day to day, but I just happened to notice it when I had it flush like this, as you can see in the picture. So let's take a look at the specs on this unit. So this features, even though it's a slim, ultra lightweight, what do you think the processor is? This is an i7-10875H. That's 8-core, 16 threads. It has 16 gigs of memory, dual channel, 3200 megahertz, a 1 terabyte SSD NVMe. Also features a 2070 Super, but it's a Max P edition. So that means you're getting the full 115 watts, which is certainly impressive for this unit. And this also features a 76 watt hour battery in it, along with a screen that's 1080p, 100% of the sRGB, 3 millisecond response time, and 300 hertz. This is great. It's incredibly smooth when you're browsing web pages or scrolling across your screen. It really is quite nice. And it also has G-Sync available as well. But how does it do in screen bleed? Well, unfortunately, this one does have a defect. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you do get some light bleed coming through the corner, as well as down in the bottom left-hand corner. So not perfect. Again, this will vary from panel to panel. You do get, of course, the IPS glow. Again, just kind of disappointing, and just wish they could solve for this. So I took this shot from Ultrabook Review. So they actually did a disassembly of this unit. Unfortunately, I didn't have the right tools to get this all apart for you guys, but I figured there's some great resources already there. The one thing to note about the memory in this is that it does have a portion of its memory soldered onto the motherboard. So that means that whatever you put in after the fact or upgrade will only be dual channel with whatever came with the unit. So I'd recommend getting as much memory as you possibly can for the notebook so it would maximize the longevity. So of course, ASUS packs in their Armory crate within the notebook. You get, of course, your option between silent, performance, and turbo mode. And so that gives you a various amount of different performance options, but also be able to cater your noise levels. Now, the one thing I'll have to say about silent mode is silent mode will not allow you to game in it. It does throttle the GPU pretty significantly to a point where I find most games are not playable. Now, the one thing I have to say about the design of the unit is I really prefer to have something that you can grip off the back of the unit. This doesn't have that, and to be frank, it's pretty difficult to do a one hand with just this. So your wrist has to be pretty strong to maneuver that. But overall, I just wish that there's something to grab on, like most notebooks have. But that being said, the screen is very nice. The other aspect is of course, ASUS with all their models, it seems like this year, does not have a web camera at all. So you are left with putting on an accessory if you need that. Now, in terms of the deck itself, the keyboard layout, quite nice, great tactile feel as it relates to the keys. The one thing I would have to say about the RGB on the keyboard though is it's not quite uniformed across all the keys. So any of the secondary upper row keys are just, they're not quite as colorful, which is unfortunate. And even with the larger keys like cap locks and enter, it's just not uniformed across the entire backlit of the key. Still very functional, just kind of an annoyance more than anything. In terms of the touchpad, touchpad's kind of a medium-sized touchpad, but really good. Didn't have any problems with it. It is a precision touchpad as well, and a great location as it relates to the rest of the keyboard. So in terms of thermals, what I found is in turbo, it was sitting around 60-61 decibels for noise levels. When you put it down into performance mode, around 57 decibels. It's pretty loud. I do wish there was a far quieter mode. There is of course a quiet mode in this unit, but the problem is you can't game on that because it actually thermally restricts the GPU to a level where you can't play anything with decent frame rate. So I just found that that was quite loud. Now the SCAR 15 actually is around the same in terms of noise levels, and that's in a bigger kind of chassis. But this is actually able to basically do the same from a noise level standpoint. Now let's talk about this battery. So being an ultra portable, I expect it to be around about 4 hours, like kind of the standard run-of-the-mill gaming notebook. This thing was able to post 8 hours and 40 minutes. I kid you not. I ran this a couple times because I was in complete disbelief. This is actually the most time I've seen out of a battery in a gaming notebook. I was just astounding. 8 hours, 40 minutes. Can't believe it. So in terms of if you need a notebook that's gaming oriented as well as something that can make it through most of the day, this one is for you for sure. So let's talk about undervolting. So this unit actually I was able to get negative 80 millivolt out of it. So that certainly helped with the thermals. I'll share a little bit about those, what those look like in the benchmarks, but overall pretty impressed with it. Able to keep those thermals a little bit more in check, which is highly recommended, especially with such a thin chassis. So let's get to the benchmarks. So PC Mark 10, this came in at 5852. What was impressive though was this actually beat out the SCAR 15, which has the slightly higher end 10980 HK. So really good score overall here. Moving over to Cinebench R20. So you can see that this actually performed quite well overall, from quiet all the way up to turbo. We saw 3193 all the way up to just shy of 4000. Now, taking a look at the temperatures. So you can see with the undervolt, this was pretty much at its max here. Even with the undervolt, it was still getting around 95 Celsius. Now in performance mode, we saw that just a slightly better result, starting to get a bit better performance and slightly lower temperature. And then quiet, posting a slightly higher score, getting a little bit more temperature. Now moving over to 3D Mark, this we could see this came in at 8369 for Time Spy and 10219 for Firestrike Extreme. So moving into Call of Duty Modern Warfare, all max settings, tessellation to near 1080p. Of course, this came in at 76.9. This is the Fog of War, and so this was actually one of the slower scores overall, which was a bit disappointing. Moving over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So this under turbo was able to get 96 frames per second, and then in performance it was 91 frames per second. Now looking at the temperatures here, so you can see it was really around 57 decibels all the way up to 63 decibels under turbo. You can see the frame rates here. And again, I put in the Alienware M15R3 just for comparison, because I think this is the standard as at least the best I've seen so far in terms of quiet sound levels, good temperatures, and great frame rate. So this was the one to beat, and it unfortunately fell a little short on it. Now moving over to Anno 1800, this came in at 112 frames per second. Metro Exodus. So we can see this one in Extreme and Ultra, just slightly behind the SCAR 15, just kind of right in that same spot, but overall great performance overall. Heading over to Death Stranding, this in turbo mode was able to hit 94 frames per second. Forza Horizon 4, all ultra settings came at 125 frames per second. And then moving over to Flight Simulator, all ultra settings. So on turbo, this came at 39.7 frames per second and performance at 36.7. Now moving over to Fortnite, epic settings, you can see this came in at 112 frames per second on epic, and then with DLSS quality settings came in a slightly higher, just about 4 frames higher at 116 frames per second. Now moving over to Apex Legend, all max settings posted just under 150 frames per second. And then Red Dead Redemption 2 ultra settings. So this came in at 54 frames per second for performance and 57 for turbo. Now looking at temps, you can see, sound levels around 60 decibels to 56 decibels. Now the interesting thing is the temps. GPU basically just stuck at 81 frames per second, and then 85, 84 on the CPU. So that was the benchmarks, everybody. I have to say this was pretty impressive in terms of being able to put the frames it did down for such a small chassis. Now, the one thing that I would say it compares to is really the Razer Blade Advanced Edition. It is very close in terms of performance for something that's effectively a far more premium product. Now, it is definitely up there in terms of price. It's about $3,000 for this unit, Canadian. And so as I start to kind of look at, how it really measured up against that product, this was pretty close. So overall, I'm very impressed with what this thing can actually do as it relates to the benchmarks. It is definitely loud, which is probably the one strike that is a pretty big strike in my opinion on this unit, but it has a lot of great things going for it. Now the one thing I do have to say is that it does get quite a fair bit of fingerprints on the back of the lid. You can kind of see they're coming in there, but you can wipe them down. It does definitely take a bit more scrubbing than just your hand, so it's something to watch out for. So in terms of the speaker in this unit, They're two underfiring units. They're okay. You know, again, laptop speakers are a fickle thing. They're not going to be great in most, but take a listen. Let me know what you think. So the audio is okay. You know, it has speakers. That's what I can say. I'd recommend headphones, and the reality is with the noise levels in this unit, you're gonna need them. So don't even worry about these speakers. Yes, they have them. Yes, you can listen to them. All right, so final thoughts on the S15. Well, you know, I have to say, I have mixed emotions on this. You know, I love the fact that you get great battery life on it. The thermals are really high even after undervolting, which was pretty disappointing. You know, the fact that this has liquid metal in it, you know, it's still in the 80s as it relates to CPU. I wish it was just slightly lower, but you know, you can't have it all. And so I think this does find a good balance though between ultra portable, great battery life, decent performance for what you're getting. And I think with all that being said, I'd give this an IMO score of 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching. That wraps up the review on the ASUS Zephyrus S15. Hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment down below. I'll post a link in the description down below for the notebook. And until next time, bye for now.